Dagenham, East London, 1940. A vehicle rolls off the Ford assembly line and onto the factory floor. It has no roof, no turret, no heavy guns. It weighs less than 4 tons. Its armor is barely thick enough to stop a rifle round at distance. And its engine? The same one sitting under the hood of your neighbor's family car. Officers in the War Office called it a utility vehicle. The soldiers who rode it called it something far worse. But here's what nobody expected. This tiny, open-topped, bathtub on tracks would go on to fight in the deserts of North Africa, the jungles of Burma, the beaches of Normandy, and the frozen plains of Eastern Europe. It would be built across 5 countries, operated by over 30 nations, and over 120,000 would be produced. No armored vehicle in the history of warfare has ever come close to that number. This is the Universal Carrier, also known as the Bren Carrier. And it is the most produced armored fighting vehicle the world has ever seen. To understand why this vehicle existed, you need to go back to the 1920s, and the brutal lessons the British Army was still processing from the Great War. Trench warfare had proven one thing beyond any doubt: infantry on foot could not survive the modern battlefield without armored support. Tanks had changed everything. But tanks were expensive, slow to manufacture, and far too heavy to be everywhere at once. What the British Army desperately needed was something different, something smaller, cheaper, and fast enough to keep pace with marching infantry. A vehicle that could carry a machine gun crew, haul ammunition, or race wounded men back from the front, all without exposing them to sniper fire and artillery fragments. Not a tank, but something that moved like one. The idea was born in a garage in 1925. Major Martel of the Royal Engineers, a man who clearly had no time for convention, built a miniature one-man tank from scavenged spare parts and wheeled it into the War Office for a demonstration. The concept caught the attention of 2 engineers, Sir John Carden and Vivian Lloyd. Their small firm, Carden-Loyd Tractors, began producing tiny tracked vehicles powered by Ford Model T engines out of a workshop near London. By 1929, Vickers Armstrongs had purchased the company. The Carden-Loyd Mark VI Tankette became one of the most exported military vehicles of the interwar years, purchased or license-built by 17 nations. The Soviets cloned it as the T-27. The Italians spun their L-335 from it. But the Tankette had limits: it was cramped, slow, and too fragile for frontline fighting. What followed was a generation of refinements: the Bren gun carrier, the scout carrier, the cavalry carrier, each solving a specific problem. But by 1939, the War Office had seen enough. Maintaining 4 separate vehicles was a logistical nightmare. A single, standardized design would replace them all. In 1940, that design arrived. They called it the Universal Carrier. Strip away every expectation of what a fighting vehicle should look like, and you start to understand the Universal Carrier's genius. The hull was a wide, open-topped steel box, 13 feet long, just over 5 feet tall. The Ford Flathead V8 sat mounted in the center of the chassis, putting out 85 horsepower. That was enough to push the carrier to 32 miles per hour on roads and 15 across broken ground. For a vehicle this size, that was genuinely impressive. The driver sat at the front left. The gunner sat at the front right, positioned behind a pintle-mounted, 303 Bren light machine gun. Additional crew members squeezed into narrow compartments running along each side of the engine bay. Operational range was approximately 160 miles under good conditions on a 20-gallon fuel load. Its armor? Thin, 7 to 10 millimeters. Enough to stop shell fragments and small arms fire at distance. Nothing heavier. But the Bren gun was just the beginning. With minor modifications, the Universal Carrier could mount a Vickers medium machine gun, a Boy's anti-tank rifle, a 2-inch mortar, a 3-inch mortar, or a PIAT anti-tank launcher. The Wasp variant stripped out the Bren entirely and replaced it with a Ronson flamethrower capable of projecting burning fuel over 80 meters. Some carriers towed 6-pounder anti-tank guns. Others carried radio sets for forward artillery observation. A handful were converted into battlefield ambulances. This was the point. The Universal Carrier wasn't designed to win a battle by itself. It was designed to carry whatever the infantry needed, wherever they needed it, faster than any man could march. The carrier first saw serious action during the Battle of France in 1940. By the time war was declared, the British Expeditionary Force had over 2,400 carriers in the field, roughly 10 per infantry battalion. They moved Bren gun teams forward under fire, evacuated wounded from exposed positions, and hauled ammunition to ground that wheeled vehicles couldn't reach. When Germany's blitzkrieg shattered the Allied lines in May, carriers were among the last vehicles still mobile during the desperate retreat to Dunkirk. At St. Valery-en-Causse, the 51st Highland Division disabled every wheeled vehicle they had, but kept their Bren carriers running for rearguard actions against advancing German armor. Hundreds were abandoned on the beaches of northern France. The Wehrmacht captured them in large numbers, rearmed them with µ-34 machine guns, and put them straight back into service. Some were even fitted with 37mm anti-tank guns. When your enemy is using your vehicle against you, that's a design compliment. In North Africa, the carrier proved its worth in a different kind of war entirely. Australian troops pushed Bren carriers toward Bardia in Libya in January 1941, racing machine gun teams across open desert at speeds Italian defenders simply couldn't respond to. Throughout the desert campaign, carriers became the infantry's lifeline, hauling water, ammunition, and wounded across terrain that destroyed heavier vehicles. Reconnaissance elements of the 78th Infantry Division used carriers to probe Axis positions in Tunisia, exploiting their low silhouette and surprising cross-country speed to gather intelligence ahead of the main advance. Then came June 6, 1944. Universal carriers rolled ashore on the beaches of Normandy. Fitted with wading screens to seal the engine bay against water ingress, they were among the first tracked vehicles to reach the sand at Sword Beach, pushing machine gun teams and anti-tank weapons inland while infantry was still pinned down under withering fire. In the weeks that followed, the Wasp flamethrower variant made its operational debut in the Bocage, the dense Norman hedgerow country where conventional weapons struggled to dislodge determined German defenders. Canadian and British units drove Wasps into farmyards, along sunken lanes, and up against fortified stone buildings. Jets of burning fuel poured into bunkers and ditches that rifle fire couldn't touch. German soldiers began surrendering the moment they heard the engine note of a carrier coming, with a flame gun at the front. In Burma, carriers threaded through jungle tracks that would have stopped anything larger. In Italy, they climbed mountain roads alongside Sherman tanks. In the Soviet Union, over 2,700 carriers were delivered under Lend-Lease, used primarily as reconnaissance vehicles and armored personnel carriers, though Soviet crews noted that the narrow tracks struggled in deep mud and heavy snow. If you're still watching, hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel. See you on the next one.